What if the thing you've spent your whole life trying to fix about yourself, the quietness, the stillness, the way you'd rather listen than perform, what if that was never a flaw? What if it was actually the most powerful thing about you and nobody ever told you? If you've ever felt like the world was built for louder people, like you were standing just slightly outside the circle, watching everyone else seem so effortlessly at ease in rooms that exhaust you, this video is going to restructure everything you believe about your own value. 7 reasons, all grounded in real research, all pointing to the same conclusion. Introversion isn't a limitation. It's an advantage. A quiet, invisible, deeply powerful advantage you've been carrying this whole time without realizing what it actually is. And reason number 5, stay with me, is going to fundamentally change the way you think about silence and attraction, because it involves a neurological mechanism that introverts have, and extroverts literally do not. Let's go. Your words are rare, and rare things are worth more. There's a principle from behavioral economics called the scarcity principle. It's simple, it's well documented, and it governs more of human behavior than most people realize. The principle states that things perceived as rare are automatically assigned higher value than things perceived as abundant. It's why diamonds cost more than glass. It's why limited edition releases create lines around the block. And it's why, in the arena of human connection, words from someone who doesn't give them freely carry infinitely more psychological weight than words from someone who gives them to everyone. Think about the extrovert in any social setting, talking constantly to everyone about everything. Their verbal output is generous, wide, and almost infinite. And because of that generosity, because the supply never runs out, each individual statement carries less weight. Not because the content is bad, because scarcity is gone. When someone speaks to everyone all the time, being spoken to by them doesn't feel like anything special. It feels expected, standard, baseline. Now think about what happens when an introvert speaks. The room shifts. Not dramatically, subtly, but it shifts. People lean in, attention sharpens. Heads turn. Not because the introvert demanded the spotlight. They never do, but because everyone in that room has unconsciously picked up on something. This person doesn't speak unless they have something worth saying. Their words are rare, and rare things command attention automatically. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who spoke less frequently in group settings were consistently rated as more thoughtful, more intelligent, and more trustworthy by their peers. Not because they were objectively smarter, because the perceived value of everything they contributed was amplified simply by how rarely they contributed it. In the context of attraction, this effect is devastating in the best possible way. When an introvert pays you a compliment, it lands completely differently than the same words from someone who compliments everyone they meet. When an introvert chooses to spend time with you specifically, that choice means something different. And when an introvert genuinely opens up to you when they let you pass that quiet, guarded exterior, you instinctively understand that you've been granted access to something private, something carefully protected, something not available to just anyone who asks. That exclusivity creates a feeling of being chosen, not casually included, specifically deliberately chosen. And being chosen by someone who is visibly selective with their energy is one of the most intoxicating experiences in all of human psychology. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of value quietly waiting to be allocated. And the less freely you give it, the more powerful every single allocation becomes. Your nervous system creates a presence that other people can physically feel. Here's where the neuroscience becomes genuinely fascinating. The brains of introverts and extroverts are not wired the same way. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't a personality theory. This is structural, measurable neurological fact. Research using PET scans and fMRI imaging has shown that introverts have higher baseline levels of cortical arousal. Their brains are already operating at a higher level of internal stimulation at rest, which means they don't need external stimulation to feel engaged, alert, or fully present. They arrive that way. Extroverts, by contrast, have lower baseline arousal. Their brains are genuinely understimulated at rest, which is what drives them outward toward more people, more noise, more activity, more input. They need the external world to bring their internal state up to a comfortable, functional level. Now here's what this means in the real world in a room, at a party, on a first date, in any moment where presence matters. Because the introvert's brain is already sufficiently activated internally, they exist in a state of natural, unforced calm. They don't need the environment to energize them. They don't need the conversation to validate them. They don't need the room to tell them they're okay. They arrive already settled, already complete, already grounded in themselves. And that settled energy is magnetic. Not in a loud, obvious way, in a gravitational way. It creates a field, a quiet atmosphere of calm that other people can sense without being able to name exactly what they're sensing. Their nervous systems register it as safety, as stability, as something solid in a room full of noise. Think right now about the people in your life who make you feel most at ease, most able to breathe, most able to be yourself without editing. I'd be willing to bet that most of them are on the quieter side. Not because quiet people are kinder, because their neurological baseline creates an atmosphere of regulated calm that is genuinely, measurably soothing to the nervous systems of everyone around them. Attraction isn't only about excitement. It's equally, sometimes more powerfully, about how someone makes you feel in their presence. And the feeling of being near someone whose energy is steady, unhurried, and completely self-contained is, for many people, more deeply attractive than any amount of performance or charisma. You don't need to generate energy to fill a room. You are energy, a different frequency, a quieter frequency. And the people who are tuned to your frequency feel it the moment you walk in. You listen in a way that makes people feel like they actually exist. This one operates like a superpower in plain sight, and most introverts are completely unaware they're wielding it. There is a crisis of attention in the modern world. Everyone is distracted. Everyone is half present. Everyone is waiting for their turn to talk. While the other person is still mid-sentence, conversations have quietly devolved into two people taking turns performing, rehearsing their next line in their head, while nodding just enough to seem engaged. Introverts don't do this. Not because they're consciously trying to be better listeners, because their brains are literally wired for depth processing. Research in cognitive neuroscience has shown that introverts route incoming information through longer neural pathways associated with long-term memory, planning, and deep evaluation. They don't just hear what you're saying. They process it. They metabolize it. They connect it to things you mentioned 20 minutes ago. They weigh it, and then they respond not reflexively but genuinely. And the person on the receiving end of that kind of attention feels something they rarely feel in ordinary conversation. They feel heard, not acknowledged, not politely received, actually heard, like their words landed somewhere real, like what they said mattered enough to be taken seriously, held carefully, truly considered. In a world that is absolutely starving for real attention, that feeling is addictive. Harvard research on the neuroscience of conversation found that when people feel genuinely listened to, their brains release the same neurochemicals associated with receiving a financial reward. Being truly heard activates the brain's pleasure centers. It literally feels good neurologically, measurably, undeniably good. And introverts deliver that experience naturally, without technique, without effort, just by being exactly who they already are. When someone gives you that quality of attention consistently, when they make you feel, repeatedly, like what you say actually matters, you begin to crave their company. Not because they're the most exciting person in the room, because they are present in a way that most people never are. And real presence, not performance, not personality, not charm, but genuine presence is the rarest commodity in all of human connection. You don't need to talk more. You need to understand that the way you already listen is doing something most people cannot replicate, no matter how hard or how long they try. Your emotional depth creates the kind of intimacy most people never experience even once. Surface-level connection is everywhere. Small talk, banter, the friendly, ultimately forgettable exchange that happens dozens of times a day between people who interact without ever truly touching each other's interior worlds. Most social interaction never goes deeper than that, and most people have quietly accepted that this is simply what connection is. Introverts don't live on the surface. They can visit it. They can navigate it when the situation requires, but the surface is not where they live. Their natural habitat is depth, the place where conversations stop being about what happened today and start being about what it means. Where you stop exchanging information and start exchanging understanding. Where the masks come off even just slightly, and two people actually see each other for a moment. Psychologist Elaine Aron's research on sensory processing sensitivity, a trait highly correlated with introversion, found that individuals high in this trait process emotional stimuli more thoroughly and respond to emotional nuance with far greater precision than average. When an introvert reads the room, they aren't just picking up on the obvious signals. They understand the specific texture of what someone is feeling, the layers underneath it, the history behind it, the things you're not saying that are somehow louder than the things you are. When someone experiences that level of emotional attunement, when someone genuinely perceives them at that depth, it creates a bond that is qualitatively different from anything surface-level connection produces. It creates the feeling of being known, not evaluated, not judged. Known in the way that people spend entire lifetimes hoping someone will eventually know them. And here's why this matters specifically for attraction. The initial spark, the excitement, the chemistry, that electric first impression might be ignited by charm or humor or physical presence. But the fire that sustains a relationship, the one that still burns years later, long after novelty has faded, that fire is fueled by emotional depth, by the sustained, specific feeling that someone understands you at a level nobody else has reached, that someone has carefully explored the interior of your emotional world and chosen to stay. Introverts build that fire naturally, not by working at it, not by following a strategy, but simply by existing at a depth that most people only visit occasionally. But introverts inhabit permanently as home. Your brain produces a chemical advantage that creates bonds built to last. This is the one I promised you, the one that rewires how you think about silence, connection, and attraction at a biological level. Because this reason isn't about behavior, it's about chemistry, literal brain chemistry. Research published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience identified a fundamental difference in the dominant neurotransmitter pathways of introverted versus extroverted brains. Extroverts are more heavily driven by the dopamine reward system. Their brains reward them for external engagement. More people, more activity, more novelty, more stimulation produces more dopamine, produces more pleasure. The system is designed for pursuit, for the spark, for the new. Introverts, however, rely far more heavily on the acetylcholine pathway. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter associated with deep thinking, focused attention, long-term memory, and the quiet pleasure that comes from internal reflection and sustained processing. It doesn't reward the brain for seeking stimulation. It rewards the brain for going deeper into what's already there. Now here's exactly why this matters in attraction, and it matters profoundly. The dopamine-driven connection that extroverts naturally create is intense. It spikes fast. It feels electric, thrilling, undeniably exciting. And it fades fast. Because dopamine is fundamentally a novelty-seeking chemical, it rewards newness. And when the newness of a person inevitably wears off, when the mystery dissolves, when the excitement of the unknown becomes the familiarity of the known, the dopamine diminishes. And a connection built primarily on that chemical pathway finds itself without fuel. The acetylcholine-driven connection that introverts create operates on an entirely different timeline. It builds slowly. It deepens gradually. It rewards sustained attention and emotional processing over time, rather than novelty in the moment, which means the bond doesn't weaken as the newness fades. It strengthens. Because the chemical system driving it doesn't depend on newness at all. It depends on depth. And depth only increases the longer two people share it. This is why relationships with introverts follow a pattern that's unmistakable. Once you recognize it, slow to ignite, sometimes deceptively, almost frustratingly slow. But once that flame catches, it burns with a remarkable stability, a remarkable endurance, a remarkable resistance to the kind of burnout that so many fast-moving, dopamine-fueled connections experience. The moment the initial excitement burns itself out and there's nothing underneath to sustain what's left. Your brain is not wired for the sprint. It's wired for the marathon. And the people who are patient enough, emotionally mature enough, to experience the kind of connection your neurochemistry builds will find something that the fast-burning connections simply cannot offer: lasting warmth, deepening intimacy, a bond that gets stronger, specifically and measurably stronger, the longer it exists. That is not a limitation. That is a biological advantage that most people would desperately want if they understood what it actually produces. Your independence is unconsciously read as extremely high value. This one operates entirely beneath the surface of conscious awareness, and it leverages one of the most deeply embedded principles in evolutionary psychology. Introverts are selectively social. They don't need constant companionship to feel okay. They don't need to be surrounded by people to feel whole. They're genuinely comfortable alone, not lonely alone, not settling alone, but content alone, complete, self-sufficient, in a way that doesn't signal isolation, but signals something far more attractive: sufficiency. And that sufficiency triggers something in the minds of everyone around them that no amount of social charm or extroverted energy can replicate. Evolutionary psychology research has consistently shown that individuals who appear less dependent on social validation are unconsciously rated as higher in mate value. The logic is ancient. A person who doesn't need the group to feel okay signals strength, self-reliance, resourcefulness, inner stability. A person who seems desperate for social input, who needs constant company, constant approval, constant external confirmation that they're acceptable, signals dependency, insecurity, potential liability. Nobody is consciously running this calculation. Nobody looks at the quiet person in the corner and thinks, that individual is displaying measurable markers of elevated mate value due to reduced social dependency. But the primal brain, the ancient, evaluative system that operates well beneath the level of conscious thought, registers it instantly. It reads the introvert's self-sufficiency as strength. And strength, in the evolutionary calculus of attraction, is always valuable. Here's where this gets genuinely interesting. Have you ever noticed that at any social gathering, the person who seems the least interested in being there is often the one everyone is most curious about? The one standing slightly apart, observing, comfortable in their own separateness, not performing, not working the room, just existing within themselves. That person creates intrigue, not by trying to be mysterious, by simply refusing to perform the social dance that everyone else is exhausting themselves performing. Their independence reads as confidence. Their selectivity reads as high standards. Their comfort in solitude reads as someone who has a rich interior world that doesn't require external fuel to stay lit. That's you. That has always been you. The very part of yourself you spent years trying to overcome, to compensate for, to apologize for. That part is the part that evolutionary psychology identifies as genuinely, measurably, biologically attractive. You don't need to join the crowd. The crowd is already watching you from the corner of its eye, quietly trying to figure out why it cannot look away. You create a space where people can finally stop performing and simply be themselves. This is the final reason, and it's the one that goes beyond attraction into something more profound, something that explains why the deepest, most lasting, most meaningful connections in life so often have a quiet person at their center. Most people, in most social interactions, are performing, playing a version of themselves they think the moment requires. The funny version, the confident version, the agreeable version, the version that laughs at exactly the right moments and says exactly the right things, and never lets the mask slip long enough for anyone to see what's actually underneath. Introverts dissolve the need for that performance, not by saying anything in particular, by what they don't do. They don't rush to fill every silence with noise, which means silence stops being uncomfortable and starts feeling like breathing room. They don't judge quickly or visibly, which means vulnerability stops feeling dangerous and starts feeling possible. They don't compete for the spotlight, which means the other person can stop performing, stop angling, stop managing their impression and start simply existing, actually existing, as themselves without the filter, without the constant low-level anxiety of wondering whether who they genuinely are is somehow acceptable. That space, that quiet, accepting, non-performative space that introverts create, naturally by simply being who they are, is something most people encounter so rarely that when they finally find it, something in them recognizes it immediately, and they don't want to leave. Research on relational depth in psychology has found that the single strongest predictor of long-term relationship satisfaction isn't shared interests, isn't physical attraction, isn't even communication skill. It's the degree to which each person feels they can be their authentic self with the other person. The degree to which the relationship provides a space free from performance, a space where you are known, seen, and accepted exactly as you are, without conditions. Introverts don't just participate in that kind of space. They generate it by their nature, by their calm, by their depth, by their willingness to sit in silence without making it strange, by their ability to see people clearly without making them feel exposed, by the quiet, radical act of being someone who simply doesn't need you to be anything other than exactly what you are. And that ultimately is the deepest form of attraction that exists. Not the kind that makes someone's heart race, the kind that makes someone's heart rest. The feeling of being with a person who lets you finally put everything down, every mask, every performance, every carefully constructed version of yourself you built to survive the outside world. You let people put it all down just by being you. And when someone finds that in you, they hold on to it with everything they have. Because they know from years of searching, from dozens of connections that never quite reached this depth, how profoundly rare it is to find a person who makes you feel like being yourself is not just acceptable, but finally, permanently, unconditionally enough. The world will keep celebrating the loud ones, the charming ones, the ones who dominate rooms, command crowds, and never seem to run out of words or energy or performance. Culture will keep insisting that those are the people who win, the ones who shine brightest, the ones who attract the most, the ones who matter. Let it, because while the world watches the fireworks, you are the fire. Not the kind that explodes brilliantly and disappears into smoke. The kind that burns slow, burns deep, burns steady enough to warm an entire life. Every piece of research in this video points to the exact same conclusion. The traits that make you quiet are the same traits that make you irreplaceable. Your selectivity, your depth, your calm, The way you listen that makes people feel like they genuinely exist. Your neurochemistry that builds bonds designed to deepen over decades, rather than burn out over weeks. Your independence that signals strength without a single word. Your capacity to create a space where people can finally, exhaustedly, gratefully stop pretending. These aren't weaknesses the world hasn't recognized yet. These are strengths the world isn't equipped to measure. Because the world measures volume, and your power has never been about volume. It's about resonance. That deep, sustained, bone-level frequency that doesn't grab attention but holds it, that doesn't spike emotions but sustains them, that doesn't create excitement but creates something far more valuable and far more rare. Home. You feel like home to the people who are ready for you, and the people who are ready for you aren't searching for the loudest voice in the room. They're listening quietly, hopefully for the one that finally makes them feel like they can stop shouting. That's your voice. It always has been. If this video shifted something in how you see yourself, even slightly, subscribe. This channel exists for the people who have spent too long believing that quiet meant less. It doesn't. It means more depth, more lasting value, more genuine impact than noise could ever produce in a lifetime. Drop a comment and tell me, which reason landed hardest for you? Which one made you think, for the first time, maybe the thing I've been trying to fix about myself was never actually broken? The comment section of this video is going to become something worth reading. A gathering of people who finally realized that the quietest thing in the room was also, all along, the most powerful thing in the room. I'll see you in the next one, quietly.